Last year was a really great learning year for us in general. Obviously, me figuring them out, the conference, like the landscape of everything, and obviously them getting used to myself and, a brand new coaching staff and a new coaching philosophies. I think we have a lot of experience on our team, which is something that you really can't teach or you can't, replace experience. And so that's something that I think we are really going to rely on and already have and will definitely need in order to obviously get back to the second round and then some. With having 9 seniors in our class, that's something that we're definitely going to rely heavily on, and a senior class that has made it to a national championship in their first year here. So they have, I think, that understanding of what it takes, have been there before. They've also seen what happens when you don't stay disciplined, maybe, and you're not kind of, keeping the main thing at times. And so I think that experience is going to show over and already has in their leadership and will trickle down to the underclassmen. And, they're going to have a little bit of that grit and that tenacity, I think, to try and get things done when times are tough in order to make it back there and obviously reach our goals and end on the best note for them that they can. We're really excited. We've obviously been working a lot on our forward movement, our attacking in the final third. I think that's something that was a big shift that we were looking to kind of implement from last season to this season. Obviously, it's really hard when you get in, and take over a program in the middle of the summer, because being a fall sport is probably the hardest from the standpoint of your time to prepare is so small, and you're trying to get your feet underneath you and figure out who fits where and stuff like that. So that was definitely difficult for us last year, but this year we were able to work on that in the spring and obviously recruit players who are maybe have some of those, the foundation of what you're looking for in those positions, and you can mold a little bit differently than obviously, somebody that's already been here under previous coaches and had different philosophies, right? And, every coach has their own kind of philosophy, and ours is definitely just a change from what they're used to. So that definitely takes time. So we're really excited to see some of what we've been building on to come to fruition, hopefully this fall. I think we've had some big spring and preseasons out of obviously our upperclassmen. Maggie Farah is somebody that I think has had an excellent spring and is ready to take on, a goal scoring position this fall, which we're really excited for because, in our first scrimmage, she had 3 goals, scored them in different ways. And that was exciting to see because, what you're talking about is we have, 4 so significant goal scorers returning. And then you have somebody like that who you expect to be added to that, along with some freshmen coming in who, we've had like 6 or 7 different goal scorers in our 2 preseason games, which is just really, really exciting to see. And I think shows us that we have the ability to turn it on if things just continue to click. We have, centrally those 3, returning, and CC, Kens, and Jamie, who are, started a significant amount of games for us last year and have, a lot of games under their belt. That, again, experience, especially in the midfield, not only just for any team, but obviously a team in our conference, is huge. And that is something that we are for sure going to rely on. We're going to probably coach them a little bit harder and expect more out of them because of that, because that's what we need. They've done a great job so far. We've had our ups and downs already, just like in our first, preseason games with figuring things out, but it's all been something that we need to be tested with in order to grow and to get better. And, I think we've also last year with being able to have a little bit more depth centrally was awesome, because I think we've got a lot of experience underneath them as well that, they're knocking at the door waiting for their opportunities, and we'll be having a lot of opportunities for sure. So that's something we're really excited for. I think, again, we've had some big spring seasons out of our underclassmen that play in there, and we fully expect them to be within the rotation and providing that not only depth but obviously that energy potentially off the bench, or who knows, right? Like in a season things can change, and depending on who you're playing, obviously sometimes that can change the personnel that you're looking at. But the physicality and kind of that grit that Jamie brings to the game is obviously, something that significantly impacts our game. Kenzie has been a great leader for us last year, being a captain, and again this year, and having that in the center of the field is huge. And then Cece just always being threatening, and her dynamic movement and ability to drive and put pressure on frame is definitely huge in there. And then, yeah, you have a handful of returners that were getting minutes last year that we expect to get more this year. You have Marina and Viv and Abby Welker, and then you have players like Peyton, Allie, and Gigi, who are obviously returning from injury that we expect to play in there as well. So that's exciting for us to have that competition and that level, raised through them being healthy and being, another year of experience. We are really in a tough but great spot. I think we have a lot of players that provide, different skill sets into our back line. And now we're trying to figure out who is, gelling the best with each other. We have some that are great ball players, great vision. Some that are, a little bit better and stronger at 1v1 defending. The communication aspect is always important. And then we're adding, 2 freshmen in there who are trying to get experience and, and have done a great job at that so far. So it is really exciting to see. I think that was one of the things after going through last season and dealing with the injuries that we dealt with, is to where we never wanted to be in that situation again. And we have some freshmen who are ready to step up, and we have some returners who have grown a ton in this last year. The experience of the UAA from, Kinsley last year, that was something that was huge and we'll definitely rely on, and you can definitely feel this year. But the other returners, Emma coming back healthy, obviously you have Abby, Noah in there, you have KB, Kat, who all provide a little bit more depth, and again, like Sadie as well. And the leadership that we just have in general has been awesome. And we might have a younger back line than probably anywhere else on the field, considering right now, our a lot of our, senior class plays in the middle 3 or, in the front line. And so it's definitely a different dynamic back there, but it's one that has a lot of promise and has a lot of people who are ready to contribute to the game. And so it'll be great to have that depth, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Obviously, Ellie returning, having that year under her belt to obviously learn under somebody with the experience that they had, and Maggie, was definitely something that I think you can see is reflective of her growth in this last year. And, now Ellie's coming into a situation where she's a sophomore who, yes, hasn't played a ton, seen many minutes on the field, but she's now the leader of that group with 2 freshmen. And so it's definitely an interesting dynamic, but she has done an excellent job of stepping up and just constantly getting better every time she steps on that field. And then our 2 freshmen, I think, have come in eager and ready to go. And I know Coach Scott is really, really excited about all 3 of them, because again, I think the potential is there and we all see it in all 3 of them. And again, some of it's going to come down to chemistry and stuff like that, through these first couple games, through the practices, and, that confidence that they can not only instill in, themselves, but obviously in the team, because that is something that is hard to kind of, it's a different dynamic in goal. And so they are ready to go again. They all have kind of different skill sets, but I think, Ellie's done a great job of already kind of bringing, Madeline and Casey under her wing, and having Coach Scott on staff from the beginning this year has definitely been huge already, because he's been able to kind of implement some of those things that we didn't get to until maybe later on in the season last year. So we're excited to see that. And I think we have a very talented group of goalkeepers that are young and have a lot of hopeful, games ahead of them. So some of it's a little bit out of your control sometimes, as far as the dates that you have open, maybe other programs don't. Obviously the NPI and how that stuff is impacting rankings is, I think, coming into play with how teams are approaching their own scheduling. Teams have different philosophies. And so it made it difficult at times to find teams that were willing to compete. And want to either travel here, because obviously we had, we were in need of more home games at certain times and stuff like that. So it was definitely partially at the mercy of just kind of how things were playing out, but also, Last year we obviously started off the season strong with two tough opponents in Puget Sound and Pacific Lutheran. And then we kind of midway through, I think, started to, we had some games that were challenging for us. We weren't producing. We were, creating, but not really getting anything to fall our way, both obviously from luck, but also from just not executing when we needed to. And that is something that we're placing a lot of emphasis on this year and really trying to focus on. And so we also wanted to be more prepared going into UAA play, I think. So we wanted, when we heard that Ohio Wesleyan was hosting a tournament and they would have a team like Newport coming up, why not drive, the 2 hours or so to play some of the top teams in the country? And we're going to know before UAA play what we need to do to either reach that level or, if we, are within reach, or if we got to hit the drawing board and kind of rework some things, right? So that was kind of the intent behind that. Same thing with Calvin, and then you have some more local challenging teams in, Behrend, Ohio Northern, teams that have been to the tournament in the last couple years, and have gotten votes nationally or regionally. And so we will have no excuse to be scared of the UAA because we'll be having teams that are at the same level that we're used to in conference play earlier on. And I think it'll be good to have it maybe not right away in season, but a little bit midway through. So it's not like, hey, we had these two teams and now we're kind of, like shifting our mentality or things like that, which is something we needed to do a better job of last year. And that's what we're trying to prevent this year. It's going to be how well we stay connected as a unit and trust the process and be less results based and be more, these are the habits that we need to develop in order to get to where we want to get to based. Trusting the process. I think it'll look like us being a more offensive minded team and putting away opportunities instead of letting them slip through our fingers and stuff like that. And so that is something that I think like we'll need to do. It'll mean that we're going to have some freshmen that probably step up and contribute in those ways. And it'll mean our upperclassmen showing that experience and staying together and staying unified. And it'll look, a lot more like a unit this year that's having a lot more fun both on and off the field. And it's going to show in our results if we can continue to do that. I think we have a great culture. I think our captains and our senior leaders have done an unreal job, and it allows us to focus on some of the X's and O's a little bit more than some of the other team stuff because we don't really have, some of that outside stuff going on that sometimes, teams can face. And so if we can keep continuing on that path and then obviously build the confidence and show that these changes that we're implementing are working, which I think we've seen the benefits of that already in our first couple games, then I think, that's what's going to get us there. And that's what's going to help us continue to keep moving on.